what is important is that this book is totally bilingual. And we'll talk more about where we're going with that. So I'll read it in Spanish since it's very short, and then in English. Tunas. Hoy vi en el calendario 12 de octubre, que ya no era el día de Colón. La mujer en el super castillo en White Center, enfrente de mí, María Bravo, amablemente seleccionó tunas para que mis estudiantes las probaran. Me dijo en purépecha, así se dice resisto. Ji no weixin. No se escribiría. No sé escribirla, pero la hablo, dijo. Y mis 3 hijos americanos hablan en muchas lenguas, orgullosa. Carlos compartió su mesa conmigo en la fondita. Cerca de ahí, bajo el toldo, ciudadanos de la lluvia, Puebla, Oaxaca, Hidalgo, Durango y yo, resguardándonos de la lluvia. Me dijo en zapoteco, resisto hoy, huyenda. Prickly Pears, October 12. Today I saw that it was not Columbus Day. The woman at Castillo Supermercado in White Center, ironically the Mexican heart of Seattle, in front of me, Maria Bravo kindly took over selecting prickly pears for my students to try, told me that in Purépecha, this is how you say I resist, Jinokoishin. And my 3 American children speak, she said, in many languages. Carlos at lunch shared the table with me at La Fondita, up the street, under the awning. Citizens of the rain, Puebla, Oaxaca, Hidalgo, Durango, and Mexico, guarded from the rain, he said to me in Zapotec, I resist today, huyenda. But it should be normal. It should be normal that all of us speak with all our languages without excusing ourselves. So that's why I will read this poem. And I'd love to stand up because I'm a better person standing up. This is translanguaging for Ofelia Garcia, who is the researcher in New York University and in Columbia that has been doing this. Because I speak with my imagination, you stopped listening to me centuries ago. Porque hablo con mi imaginación y no mi lengua, me dejaste de escribir hace siglos, de escuchar hace siglos. Translanguaging is not Spanglish. Translenguar no es español, sino un carnaval de palabras florido y resonante en todos mis existentes lenguajes. It's not fully having the specific words university specialists would use to say the same thing I mean in all my languages. Déjame ser comprendido en formas que no habías imaginado. Porque hablo con mi imaginación, translenguar no es español únicamente, sino una lengua con pilón. No es tener las palabras específicas que los especialistas utilizan para decir lo mismo que te quiero decir en mis lenguas bajas, en algún momento marginales, pochas, cortadas con los dientes, cut with my teeth, pero que sin embargo pegan su chicle en el universo. Las palabras que no sé tienen color en otra lengua, colores semióticos, colores feudales, colores ambientales, colores maternales. If I say okay, si te digo okay, es porque mi corazón estuvo en África. Jazz, jam, merengue y mojo colorean mi espíritu en África Occidental. Y me enseñaron a comer serpiente. And they taught me to eat serpent and adore it at the same time. Y adorarla a la vez. Si te digo mis placeres, jambo, mambo, gambo, marimba, es porque la música de África pasó de los huesos a la lengua. The music from Africa passed from my bones to the language and contaminated my spirit, my polyglot spirit. Swahili arrived in a safari of words. Swahili llegó en un safari de palabras, en mi profundo carnaval de sentimientos, in my deep carnival of senses. Thank you.
The 19th century, the very end of it, I thought was very interesting, and it's the passage of time that leads up to the Mexican Revolution in 1910. And we have, who was the president then? Porfirio Diaz.
It was Porfirio Diaz,
so
and he was a dictator.
Porfiriato, which was about 35 or 30 years. Yeah. So during that time, everything changed in Mexico to set it up to have a revolution. And that was also the era in which my family sort of broke out of what had been going on for the previous 400 years and splintered and went in different directions. So we think about history as being sort of static, and then there's one big break, and then people go back to being the way they were before, but that's not what happens. They change completely at that point and go in different directions. You were talking about people in your family and the notion of going on and getting an education. And this amazing thing happened to my father, which is he grew up mostly in Redlands, California, in a farm worker community. And when he was 18, he graduated from high school, and he was the only Mexican who graduated that year. And one of his American classmates commented on it to his father, who was on the board of Redlands College, which is now Redlands University, and asked my father if he wanted to become a student there, and they wouldn't charge him tuition. So we jumped a generation there, because my father, who was born in 1912, was able to go to college. And so we didn't have to be farm workers. We were able to take indoor work, essentially. And it was a given that we could go to college and we could scrape together the money to do it. So we did.
So this is another question from my students. In writing, publishing, republishing this particular book, The Flowerless Book, how have you changed? What has been the impact on you of writing about the Ópata, and in particular about these three women?
Quite a lot has changed since I wrote that book, and when I finished it and got it published, I thought, well, this is going to be sort of a requiem. Nobody's going to remember these people. No one is going to claim them anymore because there's nobody left. And I thought, well, at least I got the book published. But then the internet made itself a part of our lives, and we all got AOL accounts. Remember that you got a little shiny CD thing that you could use to decorate your Christmas tree? And so people started communicating this way. And somebody who was on Mexico, Yahoo.com Mexico, contacted me and asked me if I wanted to join their online group of Ópata. Sure, see what happens. And it turned out to be the beginning of a whole community of people who were all looking for each other, because all of our families had been driven out of the Sonora Desert or left to take jobs in California, working on farms. And so almost all the people who I interacted with had at least one grandparent who was Ópata. And so I learned from these people, and I learned that there were a lot of us around. And so it has come to the point where people want to put the tribe back together and be incorporated. All these things that make you an official entity in the world, in the legal world, So
that makes sense because they've been invisible as
yes,
this entire time.
yes, and in part deliberately invisible because in Sonora, if you owned land and they found out you were Indian, they would kill you, and there would not be any repercussions. And so people had stopped saying that they were all like that for that reason, and would just kill somebody, a descendant. But each time that happens, there's more erasure, one more fact is lost, one more song is lost, one more religious ritual is lost. So we've all sort of pushed our marbles into a little pile on the table and said, this is what we have now, what can we do with it? Because I believe that a living culture is not a static culture. It's changing anyway. All of our cultures are changing every day as we are exposed to different things and have conversations with different people. So you can't just have a culture that's frozen in time that you're going to go visit every once in a while and say, oh yeah, these people have these dances that they do for the harvest and for love and marriage and ritual. It's reacting to the 21st century. So here we are. Okay. As Gabriela said, there are 3 generations of women in this book, and so this section is told from the point of view of the second woman, who was based on my grandmother. How I came to be different from my mother. Growing up in the Moreno's house, I knew nothing but love. I did not want for food, and I played with the Moreno children as though they were my own brothers and sisters. I did not get pretty new dresses like the other girls, Elsa and Julieta, but sometimes I got their old ones. Be grateful for what you have, said my mother, and I was. I helped to feed the animals, the chickens and goats, and helped to cook or carry water or do whatever else was needed. In my village, my mother used to say, the girl always looked her best to carry water. That phrase, in my village, sometimes meant the beginning of a story, or sometimes it just meant that there was work to do, and this was how she expected me to do it. When I did something in a way she did not approve of, she would say, no es costumbre, it's not the custom. But what is the custom in Tucson, I would ask, and she would look away and not answer. Then I felt badly and did as I was told. My mother, Concha, did not like things to change. She was afraid of many things, but most of all, she was afraid that if too many things changed, she would be left understanding nothing at all. The other thing that she was afraid of, especially when I was very small, was that my father would try to steal me. If a man with red hair ever tries to talk to you, she would say, a very white man with red hair, you must run away. This was confusing to me, in part because I had many questions about this man, my father. One of the questions was, how could people have red hair? I'd never seen anyone like that. Everyone I knew had black hair, and I'd seen a few people with lighter hair, brown. Once a woman passed in a carriage, and the other children pointed and said, look, una güera. But under her hat, I could see that the woman was just old, and with whitish hair. I did not understand why the others made a fuss over someone who just looked old, although she was in a carriage, and I liked her hat. But people did not have red hair. Like the blacksmith's building? I asked. No, said my mother. Like a bird? A cardinal? No, said my mother. Like a burning red coal? I asked. My mother stopped. She did not like these questions. Now her face turned inside, the way it did when she struggled to say something she did not know how to say or did not completely understand. Yes, she said finally, it was like a burning red coal. But the way she said it, I could not tell if she meant the color of my father's hair or the way it felt when he hurt her. That was the way she put it, when he hurt me. That's why I was born, because the man with red hair had come into the house when my mother was alone and hurt her. So she was afraid of him and was afraid that he might try to steal me. And so I had many questions, but as a little girl I was happy. My mother thought I laughed too much and told me to cover my teeth when I laughed. Escos, she would say, then look at me in exasperation when I laughed again. My mother used to laugh all the time, she said. You are just like her. But I knew I was not. When Concha told me about her mother and her village and the Hu'uki, where her mother told her stories, I knew that I would never be like Semu. She had been very brave, and although I was braver than my mother, I was not like Semu at all. As I grew older, I came to see that the heart of my mother's world was the Hu'uki that belonged to her mother, Semu, and her tia, Bancha. Bancha's world radiated out from it like the framework of a basket. Everything she knew about it began with the stories she had learned in the moist, semi-dark of the woman's place, and every story she heard was connected to that place and told her how to live her life in that place. She never used the old language in front of La Señora, but waited until we were alone. She did not want Mrs. Moreno to think that she was una India cruda. But as my mother spoke about these things, the planting, gathering palm and weaving it in the Hu'uki, the ceremonies and fiestas that marked the passing of the seasons in her village, she became a different person. My mother seemed to expand from the quiet, demure woman I knew into someone larger and darker. When the language of the old people peppered her speech, she spoke with a confidence I never heard in her Spanish. Her face was different, and she moved her hands in a different way when she told the old stories about the old ways. These were the things that she knew about, was sure of, because they had been passed down for so many generations that it wasn't something she had been forced to learn later in life. They were a part of her in a way that life in Tucson never would be. However, my mother claimed that the Ópata had once lived near Tucson. To the north and east of these places, the Pueblo people still lived, maybe cousins. That was the known boundary of their world. We were good friends with all of these people, she would say. The Pueblo people used to come to Sonora once a year to trade, even when I was a little girl. Muy buena gente. I came to realize, in her terrible journey to Tucson, not only had my mother lost her family, but she also felt as though she had come to live on the edge of the known world, teetering on the edge of a precipice, and would never be comfortable living here. The stories of this land were not her stories. The gods, Papago, Catholic, or Protestant, were not her gods. God only spoke to her through the ceremonies, the dances, the visit to Magdalena. God knew San Francisco and the river valley of her birth. She felt that he could not hear her cry so far from the land of her birth. He could not hear her cry over the screams of the train whistle, the din of so many people. He could not hear her whispered prayers over the clatter of china dishes in every kitchen. There were so many people here with so many things, and they were all from somewhere else. I knew other people who had come from the towns of Sonora. They found places to live, learned to speak Spanish that others understood, bought houses and sold things to make money, and sent their children to school. They found a way to live in this place, but maybe they had not come alone. Maybe there had been enough of them, enough familia, to help each other, to comfort each other on the dark nights and hungry days, when it seemed that they would not survive. By the time my mother got to Tucson, she was all alone.